What's going on YouTube? It's Teach, back again with another video, and today we are reacting to Daniel Jeremiah's latest 2023 NFL mock draft. Really excited to examine this. I have had one pick spoiled for me, but for the most part, I am digesting this for the first time, which hopefully is exciting to you, and hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. Be sure to hit that like button if you do. Subscribe if you're new, looking for more draft content. And of course, comment your thoughts from Daniel Jeremiah's latest mock down below in the comment section. A little bit later reacting to this than some other YouTube channels. So if you've had the time to kind of think and let this sit with you and process it, let me hear your thoughts. Who's your favorite team? Do you like the pick? Who goes too high? Who goes too low? All that sort of fun stuff. But with all that down, let's go ahead and jump right into it. And at number 1 overall, he goes Bryce Young, followed by CJ Stroud. So yeah, I mean, a lot of my mocks and the betting favorite right now is CJ Stroud. So that's kind of been my justification for why I'm doing that. But nonetheless, if it was me, Bryce Young would go number 1. And then if that were to play out, I do think Houston would take CJ Stroud. So I think it's going to be one of these two guys and the one spot, and then the other one go in number 2. So either way you spin it, I think this order makes a lot of sense. But after seeing CJ Stroud's pro day and Josh McCown and how he's talking to Stroud, it does kind of feel like that's the direction they're leaning. And then I think for Houston, in a perfect world, they'd get Bryce Young, so they'd be big winners. Cardinals take Will Anderson Jr. No real surprise here. 2 QBs, then a blue chip defensive player for a defense that desperately needs it, especially in an offseason where they lose Zach Allen, they lose Byron Murphy, get a new head coach. Like, you're just looking for that identifying piece, and you lost some of the other players on the roster from last year that could have been that. So you go ahead and take Will Anderson here, and that leaves Anthony Richardson going to the Colts. So this does feel more and more likely. Will Levis it kind of feels like he will, once we get to draft night, be QB4 off the board. I know we just did the reaction to Mel's mock, and he was QB3, but to me, it's starting to feel like Anthony Richardson's the Colts guy. You start Gardner Minshew for a year, then Richardson takes over, which wasn't surprising whatsoever. And hey, Shane Steichen and his track record working with Herbert, working with Hurts, paired up with Anthony Richardson, I'm absolutely tuned in and wanting to see how that plays out. So don't hate it whatsoever. I'd be curious if the Colts do have to move up to 3 just to guarantee no one leapfrogs them and steals AR, or Will Levis for that matter if that's their guy, away from them. And then we get Jalen Carter going to the Seahawks. Yeah, I mean, he's a lot better than Jarran Reed right now, but also think long term. And to me, I just can't see him getting past 5 or 6. At the absolute worst, 9 to Chicago, 10 then for Philadelphia. So yeah, but like I said, 5 or 6. I know the off the field stuff's not for everybody, and it's definitely a little concerning, especially with pre-existing maturity questions around Jalen Carter. But you just look at the on-field tape, and this is the same NFL that Deshaun Watson caught a 12-game suspension, right? Like, no matter what you kind of do off the field, if you're a good football player, teams take chances on you. I mean, Kareem Hunt, wasn't too long before he found a new suitor once he got let go by Kansas City. So it's unfortunately the world we live in, and it's not perfect by any stretch, but ultimately with the no contest play, I do think Jalen Carter is going to go this high, and he'd be an awesome fit for Seattle, being a better player than Jarran Reed, and then him and Draymond Jones in those 3-4 DN spots, and then you have those guys rushing from the middle when you go nickel and dime. That would be absolutely scary for opposing offenses. Then the Lions take Devon Witherspoon, so CB1 off the board in this case is Witherspoon. It feels like it's been a while since we've seen specifically Witherspoon going to the Lions, but that did used to be a hot pairing, and it used to be one that we saw in a ton of mocks, and it's been a little bit of time before or since we've seen Witherspoon as the first corner off the board. So it's cool to see Jeremiah kind of sticking to that, showcases that Witherspoon still does have a lot of love because DJ's as plugged in as it gets. So I still like Devon Witherspoon as NFL ready as anybody in this corner class, and I would argue the most NFL ready of all of them. And then a perfect man press corner, a perfect fit for that Aaron Glenn defense. Yeah, a little short, maybe. Yeah, a little light, but and maybe didn't have the craziest schedule that he faced at Illinois. But you just look at the tape, his willingness to tackle. He is a hard hitter. There's a lot to like there, and he feels like a guy who would mesh well with Detroit's culture. And then we get the Raiders taking Tyree Wilson. This would be an awesome win, right? Like a guy who DJ's had other mocks where Wilson goes ahead of Will Anderson because of the stuff that he's heard. So Raiders big time winners here. No guarantee Chandler Jones is able to turn back the clock to 2 and 3 years ago. And in that case, you need someone else that can help Max Crosby. And Tyree Wilson, yeah, it took 5 years. It took until his final year, his 5th year at Texas Tech before he kind of broke out. But me personally, I'm not too worried about that, partially because I just don't really think of the last elite edge rusher that came out of Texas Tech. So I don't really know if that's the program that we should be thinking of as being able to develop guys within a year or two's time. And also, he's just such a freaky build that, yeah, if he took a little bit of time to kind of figure it out, that's okay. That's twitched up athletes and freaky builds, you kind of build yourself that time. The more important thing is that Wilson did ultimately start to piece it together with the Raiders. So, or Red Raiders, that is, going to the Raiders. That would also be kind of a cool little parallel there. But nevertheless, I think this is a guy who is still kind of hitting his stride, which makes him really, really scary at the NFL level, because that body and what we saw last year, I think you're getting a pretty solid run defender right away with some untapped potential as a pass rusher. And again, any help you can get Max Crosby will go a long way for the Raiders. Then the Falcons take Christian Gonzalez. I mean, him paired up with AJ Terrell, Andrew Sign, Jesse Bates. All of a sudden, that becomes a legit, really good secondary, and it goes a long way to trying to generate more pass rush, right? Like, if that coverage unit takes a step forward, who knows? The sack production might be there this year for Arnold Ebiketie. And I also think the second round, right where they're picking, right around 44, is a rich spot in the draft to get some holdover edge rushers, because there's a lot of guys that you could convince me should go late one, but there's only so many teams, and we have one less first round pick this year, right? So a lot of those guys are going to, carry over the next day, whether it's Keon White, Felix Anudike-Uzomah, B.J. Ojulari, maybe it's Will McDonald, Derek Hall. All these guys are live, and I think they would all be interesting additions to that defense. Ideally, I think the Falcons would like to add someone with a little bit more beef, just because Ebiketie is a little bit lighter. But nonetheless, I think if you play the board like this, corner in the first round, then edge in the second, the defense gets a whole lot better in Atlanta. Next, Chicago Bears take Peter Skoronski. So Pierce Johnson Jr. is my OT1 off the board, but nevertheless, if they do go off at the tackle, I do like them addressing that position. Also, guard flexibility and maybe becoming an awesome guard. I'm going to go ahead and scroll past so you don't have to keep watching the Verizon banner rotate. But also, based off of that blocking scheme, Luke Getsy, you're going to have that zone blocking. Like, Peter Skoronski's ability to get out and move and block in open space is really going to be something they could potentially covet, and maybe does give him the trump card over Paris Johnson Jr., who, I think moves plenty fine and gets to the next level as good as anybody in this class, but I do think Peter Skoronski is probably the best offensive tackle when it comes from a movement perspective. Then the Eagles take Lucas Van Ness. I really do think this would be an awesome pairing. They love these, physical pocket pushing type of edge rushers. Brandon Graham's back on a one-year deal. To me, this is like a perfect Brandon Graham replacement, a guy who has long throughout his career won with power, and Van Ness with that explosive get-off knows how to turn that into power. A guy who played a ton on the inside, and I think there's some sneaky bend that not a lot of people are accounting for just because he played on the inside. So I already think he's got a skill set that Philadelphia would like, and I think there's a little bit more to potentially learn from with Van Ness once he moves outside of the edge. So this feels like a Philadelphia pick for sure. Then the Titans take Jackson Smith-Njigba. Yeah, I'm kind of pondering this as a fit in my future mocks too, because Treylon Burks, Jackson Smith-Njigba, that becomes kind of an interesting wide receiver core. We saw Treylon Burks play on the outside, and the Titans drafted A.J. Brown. He did a lot of slot work at Ole Miss. They move him outside, and he doesn't miss a beat. Is that just kind of their MO? And also, it's not really fair to compare JSN to Justin Jefferson, because Justin Jefferson did have a lot more reps playing on the outside at LSU, specifically in the 2 years leading up to him going to the NFL draft. He just ultimately moved in the slot in that 2019 year because they had so much talent that could play on the outside. Jackson Smith-Njigba, we didn't really see that, but if he's really running a 4.4, 840, 4.52, wherever that is, somewhere in that range, maybe this is a guy that could move the outside, and maybe that's just the Titans, type, right? We're going to take these slot guys and prove that they're just fine on the outside. Maybe. And if that were to play out, then Smith-Njigba becomes a very different receiver. To me, he's kind of slot only, but hey, been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again. That's part of the whole process. So Titans think he could do that. That's a really interesting 1-2 punch on the outside. Or if they feel like they can keep Burks on the outside, then I don't mind this pick as a Robert Woods upgrade, really. You get younger, you get cheaper at the position where you're kind of hamstrung by the cap and paying a lot of other position players, and you're paying Ryan Tannehill, right? So JSN here would be a really interesting add. Go wide receiver in the first round, back-to-back years. I don't know how Mike Vrabel or Tennessee that feels, but it's definitely a position where they have to get better. And then the other thing I want to note here is quarterback in play? On paper, it feels like it should, right? But if you were going to move on from Ryan Tannehill, wouldn't you have done it already? Wouldn't you have wanted that cap space to be cleared up so you could be more active in free agency? It feels like you would have wanted to already make that decision versus now it feels like, okay, we're going to give Tannehill another year. So I thought about Titans moving up and drafting a quarterback in some of my mocks, but since they already have Tannehill, I just don't really know how plausible that really is. But anyways, Let's move on to the Houston Texans. Myles Murphy, yeah, he's a guy that continues to slip and slip and slip in my mocks, which is disappointing because I still like the upside. I mean, awesome frame, awesome athletic ability, just has to learn how to play the position, and specifically has to learn how to become a pass rusher. I think he's a pretty solid run defender right away. But, for Houston, who has at least another year to kind of draft and develop their young pieces, Myles Murphy makes a lot of sense. And if they figure it out and D'Amico Ryans kind of unlocks that, pass rush ability out of him and puts together a full move set, learns how to stack one move off of another, and so on and so forth, he becomes a legit, star level to superstar level guy. It's just who wants to take on the task of teaching an edge rusher how to be an edge rusher and be a pass rusher, right? So it's give and take, but man, it's the potential certainly there, but I could also see where, from a pass rush perspective, there's a fair amount of bust potential. Now, that being said, I think because he's already a good run defender and he has an awesome frame and awesome athletic traits, the floor is really not as low as some people might think when they say boom or bust. It's just, if he doesn't figure out how to become a pass rusher, he just becomes your, whatever, run-of-the-mill edge that you took at 12. That's a little disappointing. But again, if he figures it out and becomes, the pass rusher that his potential says that he could be, this is going to become a steal at 12. So it could go really either way here for Houston. And then we get the Jets taking Nolan Smith. Interesting. So kind of harkening back to the Titans conversation where it's like, if you wanted to move on from Ryan Tannehill, wouldn't you have done that already? And yes, the Jets could move on from Carl Lawson and save a lot of money, but wouldn't you have already done that? You drafted Jermaine Johnson last year. You still have John Franklin Myers. You could add a third guy somewhere. So don't really know if they're going to move on from Lawson, but maybe if you draft Nolan Smith here, that does enable you to allow yourself to do that. This would be a really interesting fit, that speed rushing type and that, four-man front, base 4-3 for Coach Robert Saleh. So I'd love to see what this potential could be. I mean, I can't really even think of a guy in San Francisco that Saleh had that was like Nolan Smith. So I'd be here for this fit, and could make sense for a logical Carl Lawson replacement if they feel like, hey, we can get younger and cheaper at the position, and we might need that money elsewhere. They've been pretty active in free agency. Plus, once you bring on the Rodgers contract, who knows? You may have to cut corners, and maybe Lawson is one of those guys. So don't hate it. And it's definitely different. I mean, it's been pretty much offensive tackle for me the whole way through. So it's a little refreshing for Jets fans, I'm sure. Patriots take Bijan Robinson. Pats fans, let me know what you think about this one. Yeah, I actually don't really see this as all that plausible. Bill Belichick's first round MO is like offensive line or defense, and then has swung and missed on wide receiver. But I'm hoping that he takes another swing of the bat this year with Quentin Johnston. But that's my hopes and my hopium kicking in. But nonetheless, I just can't really see them taking Bijan here. Yeah, they lost Damian Harris, but Ramondre Stevenson's fine. If you're gonna add a guy, add him late day 2, early day 3. And this is a really good running back class, and they are the exact team I kind of think of with just wait. Remember the last time you drafted a running back in the first round? Didn't really turn out all that great. So I would just wait and get a shutdown corner, draft a wide receiver, find another offensive tackle. I think there's a lot of different directions you go in. Nothing against Bijan Robinson as a player. He's always hard to mock for because really good talent, just hard to find that perfect fit and hard to find the team that you feel like could justify drafting running back in the first round. I just don't think New England is that spot. Green Bay Packers taking Paris Johnson Jr. Yeah, so second OT off the board. Yeah, and a little bit of a gap there between Skoronski at 9 and then Paris here at 15. But, dude, this would be awesome for the Packers. This would be a sprint the card in type of situation, in my opinion. It'll be interesting. If they get pick 13 from the Jets, I'm kind of thinking that pick's going to end up being offensive line, which is fun. I guess we've been mocking 13 as offensive tackle pretty much the whole cycle just to New York. And I think if the Packers do get that pick, makes a lot of sense. David Bakhtiari can't play forever. I like Zach Tom, but I still think they could probably garner an extra tackle and be okay. And maybe if it's Skoronski who has that guard flexibility, you feel that much better about it. But if it's Paris Johnson Jr. as your Bakhtiari replacement, I think that's awesome. And also a guy who's played right guard. So maybe you could flip him back over to that where he was 2 years ago with Ohio State. So this becomes a really, really interesting fit. If the board played out like this, that would be an absolute win for Green Bay, in my opinion. And then we get Dalton Kincaid going to the Commanders. Yeah, Kincaid's a good player, and it's another mock where Kincaid's the first tight end off the board. I still have Michael Mayer as my tight end 1, but I get the hype. I mean, I understand he's you can do more with Kincaid from an athletic perspective. Does more yards after the catch wise. He's just more dynamic with the ball in his hands, and he's hard to bring down versus Michael Mayer because he's a 4'7" guy. You can locate and wrap him up. Yeah, he's big and he's lumbersome, but he's like other tight ends we've seen before. Kincaid is a little bit more special and kind of an it factor about him. So I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if he's the first tight end off the board, and I kind of played that out my last mock. Now, he didn't nearly go as high as 16, and I don't really know if the Commanders would want to do this. I still think they need to add a corner, so I'm looking at Joey Porter Jr. on the board here. I'm looking at Deonte Banks, who would be an awesome fit. And I think they're really excited about Cole Turner, tight end from Nevada from last year's draft, if memory serves, if not 2 years ago, but pretty sure it was last year. And I think that Bates, Logan Thomas isn't really who he once was, but with the other guys in the building already, I think this position's okay enough, at least for a first round perspective. If you want to take Tucker Kraft falling into your lap in the third round, sure, okay, that's easier to for me to validate. But here in the first round, I'm not so sure about it. Anyways, let's move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They take Broderick Jones. It almost feels like DJ might have kind of worked the board, so Pittsburgh could draft a tackle. They definitely could get better there. And dude, Isaac Seumalo at left guard with Broderick Jones at left tackle. Najee Harris is going to be running wide left, snap in and snap out, right? Like, that's the type of identity I think the Steelers want. So, in a lot of my mocks, I have them taking Anton Harrison at some point, and great pass blocker, but I think the Steelers have kind of, made their bed and they're ready to sleep in it. And they want to be a run-heavy team. They want that ground and pound identity. And they want to be like the Steelers of old, right? They want to be like the Bus back in the early 2000s. That's what they're looking for. So I think Broderick Jones is like the tackle they're kind of looking at. Now that's just solely me going off of what I think they want to do, what they've done in previous drafts and whatnot. So it's definitely a leap and it's an assumption. No guarantee I'm right. But I think if in a perfect world they get Broderick Jones next to Isaac Seumalo, they'd be very, very happy. Then flip Dan Moore over to the right side. But I could also see them liking DeJuan Jones and not caring that, consensus board will have him a lot lower than 17. They'll draft him and flip Chukwuma Okorafor over. So these big, tall, physical tackles that once they get their hands on you, the play's kind of done. Jones at the left tackle spot, Broderick Jones, that is, at the left tackle spot, and then DeJuan Jones at the right tackle spot. Those are the guys that Pittsburgh's really, really keying in on if they are going to go tackle in the middle of the first. Then the Lions take Kalijah Kancey. This would be a perfect three-tech to put in between Aiden Hutchinson and Lee McNeil. Now, you do have to, assume that Lee McNeil can take the flashes in some of the big games he had last year and stretch that out over a 17-game sample. But if he did, he's also a solid run defender with the pass rush upside. And then Kalijah Kancey, especially if McNeil can be a solid run defender, that hides some of Kancey's weaknesses. And then you're talking about insane get-off, great hand usage, a guy who knows how to be a pass rusher, like where Myles Murphy needs to learn a move set and how to, stack moves and play an offensive tackle in front of him. Kancey's got that. Like, this guy has that repertoire. And then, of course, Aiden Hutchinson. We said a lot of the same stuff about him last year. He had a little bit of a T-Rex arm problem, but everything else about Hutchinson is hard not to love. So Kancey between those guys, and that defensive line looks really, really scary in Detroit. Then the Bucks take Will Levis. Yeah, wow, he totally blanked my mind. We even talked about the Titans, and that's just kind of the guy I feel like they might dig and want to move up for. But yeah, this almost feels like DJ saying this is where he thinks he should go versus, I don't know, DJ's plugged in, so I don't want to doubt it. Maybe this is kind of the true landing spot for Will Levis. But I just can't see it. I can't see him making it to the back half of the first round. And also, if he lingers to 19, Tampa Bay sure makes sense. Get him in a camp battle with, Baker Mayfield and then just, kind of move on from Kyle Trask, maybe flip him for a 5th round pick or whatever. But, yeah, I feel like they would also be really exploring trade options because there could be a team like the Vikings, which, hey, I know we're going to talk quarterback with them. Again, that was the pick I kind of had spoiled for me. But Giants, the Vikings, plenty of other teams there on the back half of the first round. The Saints, for that matter. I know they paid Derek Carr, but there might be enough guarantees to wear them off. But still, plenty of teams in the 20s that if Will Levis is falling, where it's like, okay, well, do we want to make this jump? And I could almost see Tampa Bay just being like, hey, we're going to reset a little bit. Let's take that trade offer. I don't think Levis makes it to 19, but it sure would be interesting. And I actually did a mock with one of my subscribers, actually, on the podcast, 2 old guys screaming, get off my lawn. And we played out a scenario where Tampa Bay traded up for Will Levis. So same, but different. Basically, you can call me Daniel Jeremiah. All right, jokes aside, let's go to pick 20 here. Seattle takes Jordan Addison. Okay, I'm interested by this. I think JSN's a little bit better of a fit, but Addison can also play in the slot. You get a really crisp route runner, maybe not as gaudy of an athlete and maybe a little bit lighter than what people were expecting. But nonetheless, I still think when you just look at the tape, there's a lot to be excited about with Jordan Addison. So I would figure a guy that starts out in the slot with Metcalf and Lockett on the outside, and then when you move on from Lockett, whether that's the end of the contract or via trade, Addison then shifts outside, and that becomes your 1-2 punch, Metcalf and Addison. Or maybe even keep Addison in the slot, and that's your 1-2 punch, kind of like what I've talked about with Jackson Smith-Njigba. Don't hate this whatsoever, and with JSN off the board, I'd be curious if Seattle is still going to address wide receiver at 20. Next up, Chargers had Zay Flowers. I've been saying for a while they need speed. Yes, I still like Josh Palmer, and especially as your wide receiver 4, that's awesome. But I also think the advantage here with Flowers is, fast forward a year, we're talking about Keenan Allen having a cap hit north of $30 million. We're going to be seeing in the same song we have this previous offseason as well as this current offseason we're in now. Like, when do the Chargers move on from Keenan Allen? Because that contract is, a big hit to the cap. So I could see Zay Flowers also being a guy they move into the slot if they do move on from Keenan Allen in a year's time. So you get that over the top speed that this team's kind of missing, but also a guy who can play inside and out. So you have some insurance based off of what they're going to do with Keenan Allen and the rest of that wide receiver room. Then the Ravens take Joey Porter Jr., also a guy I don't think falls as far. I think that top 3 in the corner class is going to go relatively high. If the Ravens do take corner, I think it's going to end up being Deonte Banks, but he may even be gone by this point. I've had plenty of mocks where he's gone before 2022. So would I love this fit? Absolutely. Man press, kind of written all over Joey Porter Jr. That being said, I think he's a good enough athlete to be able to transition and play some cover 3. And if you're a great man coverage corner, you can play quarters. So I don't think that he has to be someone who's playing man press or cover 2, getting guys to the line of scrimmage, all that sort of stuff. I think there's enough flexibility there to shift him into some different zone schemes as well. But nonetheless, Ravens need a corner, and if Joey Porter Jr. makes it this far, it would kill me as a Steelers fan to see this, but it would make a lot of sense and it'd be a really good fit, and it'd be a great value in my opinion. Vikings then take Hendon Hooker. Yep, this was the pick that I had spoiled for me, unfortunately. Is there a world where Hooker could go in the first round? Absolutely. You have him sit behind Kirk Cousins for a year, let him rehab after that injury, and then, at the worst, I've been saying the same thing actually with Hooker going to the Lions, primarily on day 2. But, Goff to me, I think he's kind of inflated by Ben Johnson, just like there were years where McVay elevated Goff beyond what he actually is. He's still a top 32 starter, but there are years where the scheme, I think, boosts him up a little bit better and, inflates his public perception. And I definitely think Hendon Hooker could be something like that, right? Like, I definitely think he could at least be a facilitator, and the Lions have a good situation around him. And for the Vikings perspective, it's like the offensive line's made some good strides in the right direction. Dalvin Cook is still solid enough, but you also bring back Alexander Mattison. You also draft running back really, really well. And if they take a swing in the back this year, I am listening. And then you have Justin Jefferson. You have TJ Hawkinson. They sure could add one more weapon in the mix, but, you can figure that out next offseason. So, you're paying Kirk Cousins, and he's this mid-tier quarterback. He's making a lot of money. So who's to say you couldn't go from Kirk Cousins, final year of his deal, and then transition to Hendon Hooker, and he could be serviceable. He could be solid. He could be a top 32 guy, and maybe doesn't have the ceiling as some of the other guys in this class. Certainly doesn't have the ceiling, in my opinion, as some of the other guys in this class, but could be a stable, solid floor to build around, and then you're not paying him $40 million against the cap like you are with Kirk Cousins. So it is interesting, and I do think Minnesota needs to find that next guy. They got to start thinking about who that is going to end up being, because it can't be Kirk Cousins forever. So do I think Hooker's going to go round 1? I would say unlikely, but if DJ's calling it here, then that's definitely a voice you want to listen to. Deonte Banks goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm thinking more they want a slot guy, a Brian Branch if he makes it this far. Antonio Johnson even, I think, is not a bad value at 24. It feels like the NFL and some other draft pundits have kind of soured on him. I still like Antonio Johnson a fair amount. But if they did add Deonte Banks, maybe give it another try with Darius Williams inside. He definitely plays better on the outside. But it's also not a bad idea just to have Banks maybe in the wings to replace Darius Williams, because that was a 3-year contract, if memory serves, $10 million a year a pop. So this could also allow you to move on from Williams in a year's time, free up some money, and then have a really awesome, on paper, man coverage duo in Tyson Campbell, who took a huge step forward last year. And then Deonte Banks definitely profiles as that type of guy with that 4.35 speed, the size, the weight, and then even just his tape at Maryland. So that could become a really, really interesting 1-2 punch. And maybe this opens up the door for you to move on from Williams. Giants take Joe Tippmann. Yeah, I don't rule out center here at 25. To me, the top center in the class is John Michael Schmitz, but I said in my mock this past weekend, I think all 3 of the top centers, not including Steve Avila, who I still consider a guard just with center flexibility, and Cody Mauch for that matter, you can even lump in that same category, Jarrett Patterson. I think the top 3, John Michael Schmitz, Luke Weipler, and Joe Tippmann, they're all gone before pick 60. I think because there is a little bit of a shortage maybe on those centers, they're going to go relatively early. And I also think there's a lot of teams that on day 2 are like, hey, well, we need a center. The Bears, the Seahawks, the Giants, just to name a few, the Cardinals, and maybe even the Raiders for that matter. And I think they're just going to be like, instead of paying a guy, let's just draft a guy. And, Tippmann, John Michael Schmitz, Luke Weichler, I think second round is kind of their range. So, yeah, I don't hate the Giants kind of getting out in front of it. Is it the best use of this pick? Maybe not, but they've been able to bring back a lot of wide receivers, sign some new interesting players like a Paris Campbell. Can he stay healthy? Maybe, maybe not. So maybe they do opt to just jump in front of the line and grab the center of their choice. Maybe it's Tippmann. I'd go John Michael Schmitz, but a little bit of a different take there for the Giants. Then the Cowboys take Mazi Smith. Interesting. I can't get on board with Mazi as a first-round guy, but I do like the athletic traits there, and I do like the progress he's made, becoming a more consistent run stopper. So I do think he's trending in the right direction. I just think I like him a lot more if the Cowboys could get him in the second round, or the Steelers took him at 49, or Seattle in the 50s, or whoever, the Raiders for that matter, even in the 30s, maybe a little rich, but wouldn't totally hate it. I just think there's a better value to be had with Mazi Smith, but kind of like what I said with the Giants, maybe the Cowboys just want to put themselves to the front of the line. I do think this is a spot where they got a true run-stopping, two-gapping nose. They would be a better defense, but I also think that's probably something like Mazi Smith in that defense with how much they move that defensive line. Mazi's a good enough athlete. Maybe he does become a three-down player, but I could also see a world where at 26 you're drafting a guy who plays on first and second down only. And that doesn't really sound super appetizing to me. So, yeah, I'd maybe go in a different direction here. I almost wondered, Bijan's gone, but I wouldn't be surprised if they like Jahmyr Gibbs. And just he's kind of a Pollard-ish player that kind of has similar skill sets, but he only got Pollard for one more year guaranteed on the franchise tag. So maybe they opt to make that 1-2 punch in the backfield and just have the same type, but just have fresh legs. Quentin Johnson falls all the way down to the Bills, and wow, I mean, are they going to pay Gabe Davis? I mean, if this were to play out, I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever because, again, are you going to pay Gabe Davis? You're already paying Stephon Diggs, you're paying Josh Allen, a lot of money that has to go around. I don't know if Gabe Davis has earned it. Take away that one playoff game against the Chiefs. Gabe Davis has had moments. He's had some splash plays, but he plays with one of the best quarterbacks in football, has a howitzer for an arm, Aaron Rodgers has made a lot of guys look better. Tom Brady's elevated a lot of guys' game. Is that Allen or is it Davis? So, man, if this were to play out, I wouldn't hate this whatsoever. And I almost wonder if immediately, Gabe Davis becomes someone that the Bills start fielding calls about. So, interesting. I haven't seen this play out in any mocks, so I don't hate it whatsoever. And yeah, it allows you to stay cheap as that number 2 wide receiver. And also, he's a great yak weapon, so he has a different skill set on top of being able to do what Gabe Davis does, stretching the field, being a vertical threat. I think he gives you more in yards after the catch ability, which could open up that offense a little bit more. Throwing on right to the Bengals, kind of a perfect La'el Collins, contingency, just in case he can't stay healthy or he continues to struggle on field with his play. So, like this a ton. I know a lot of Bengals fans are excited about this. And they could go Dawand Jones. Plenty of people have comped Dawand Jones to Orlando Brown Jr. I don't really love the idea of having two of the same types there. I also think Dawand Jones is best suited in an offense that has a fairly mobile quarterback in it, just because you have to rush contain those types of guys. So the second Dawand Jones gets his mitts on you, you're kind of taken out of the play. And if you have to rush contain, you are just opening that window. And I don't, Burrow can move, but he's not Justin Fields. He's not Lamar Jackson, nothing like that. So I would opt for Wright, but I could see you if you're a Cincy fan where Dawand Jones is your preference there. Michael Mayer then to the Saints. I like this. I know Juwan Johnson just got re-signed, like a 2-year extension or restructure or whatever it ended up being. And I know there's a lot of excitement about him, but it also doesn't hurt to try to add another guy there that could for sure be an upgrade, or at worst you have 2 solid tight ends. What's so wrong about that? Maybe not the most gaudy athlete in this class, and honestly, you compare him to Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Sam Laporta, and Dalton Kincaid, and he's kind of the least athletic of the bunch. But he's just so sound, good route runner, soft hands, and I think he just brings a lot of certainty. When you're drafting Michael Mayer, you know what you're getting. Which, for some teams, it's like, I want to know what the upside of Dalton Kincaid is all about. But there's also going to be teams where it's like, I want to have the absolute certainty that this guy can provide and produce, and that's what Michael Mayer, I think, brings here. So be interested to see if the Saints do opt to go that way if they're really buying into Juwan Johnson. Then we get the Eagles going Felix Anudike-Uzomah. They just traded for, a speed rusher in Robert Quinn, so could they add this guy who wins with speed, has a little sprinkle of power in there, but one of the bendiest guys in this year's class? You're doubling up on defensive line here, which, that's about as Eagles gets, right? Like, this is a Howie Roseman draft. through and through. You get a power rusher and Lucas Van Ness at 10 feels like a perfect Brandon Graham replacement, and then Felix Anudike-Uzomah, a bendy speed rusher that could potentially be the guy who fills in and takes snaps away from Derek Barnett maybe, or is your just true Robert Quinn replacement and that's it. I don't hate this whatsoever. Maybe if they could have added someone there on the inside, that would have been fun. Is Kalijah Kancey off the board? Now I'm having a hard time remembering. I think he went 18 if memory serves. Yeah, so Kancey off the board. All right, then Felix Anudike-Uzomah is all right in my books, and I don't hate it whatsoever. Let's go on to the Chiefs here at 31. Will McDonald, any mock you watch, including mine, it's like Will McDonald, it's B.J. Ojulari, it's Felix Anudike-Uzomah, Maybe Derek Hall. We're all keen in on these speed rushers to be the guy opposite of Karlaftis. It feels like we're all simpatico there. We want to find a different edge rush type and a good replacement for Frank Clark. So it's Will McDonald. Obviously, I've mocked it a ton, and obviously I would like that pick a lot. But that is going to do it for my reaction to Daniel Jeremiah's latest 2023 NFL mock draft. It's hard to give this one a grade because I feel like he's kind of setting the tone and letting us know what teams are thinking and who's, what the real range of players are. So I don't want to be too critical here, and he's kind of the godfather of drafts, him, Kiper, McShay, and some others. But yeah, honestly, I think a lot of really interesting fits and, player orders. Would I do things differently? Sure. But again, I got to give DJ the credit, man. He kind of sets the tone. I'll go with the 91. I've given myself enough time to think about it. Let's go 91. I like most of it. And he's always giving me different things to think about and maybe influence me for future mocks. But let me know what you would grade this mock draft down below in the comment section, whether it's a letter grade or a number grade. Love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. Who went too high? Who went too low? Who's your favorite team? Would you be excited about the first round haul that Daniel Jeremiah gave your squad? Let me hear it down below in the comments section. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you're new, looking for more football content in your life. But until next time, my name is Teej, and I am signing off.